Hello there. My name is Dr. Lori Toll here at Code and Circuit in Amesbury, Massachusetts, where one of our students, Will Shirey, will be explaining something that he has created to go along with Spot, the robotic dog from Boston Dynamics. Welcome, Will.
Thanks, Lori. Yeah, so I'm William Shirey. I am 18. I graduated Masconomet Regional High School in Boxford, Massachusetts, just this past fall, or excuse me, this past summer. And I'm a member of Code and Circuit Spot team, so we have a Spot robot here, and we've been doing a bunch of work with it this past year or so. And I am headed to WPI. I move in a couple of days, actually, August 20th. So I became interested in coding a while ago. I think actually I was a camper at Code and Circuit over the summer one year. And we were using Lego EV3 Mindstorm robots. And I became really interested in coding through that. And so then when we got Spot, of course, I was really interested in coding him too. So I went and I used the quick start guide on Boston Dynamics website. And I went through the entire guide, connecting, authenticating, registering services, and it all went really well. But when I went to make another program, I was like, oh, I have to go through all of these steps again. I have to remember all the code. And of course, I can just write all that so I won't have to go through it every time. I can just copy and paste it. But then I realized every time that you want to start the robot, you have to authenticate and you have to connect and turn the motors on. And it takes a good 10, 20 seconds every time that I wanted to run a program. So what I ended up doing to make that process faster is I created a program that would just kind of stay connected to the robot the entire time. And then it would check for changes in a file that I wanted to edit. And when I saved the file, it would automatically reload the code and run it so that I wouldn't have to reconnect to Spot every time. It would stay connected and just run my new code. So that actually made it faster, a lot faster, when I was trying out just different programs, figuring out what I could do with Spot, so that I wouldn't have to keep disconnecting and reconnecting every time I wanted to make a change. If I was just making, a couple characters that I was changing, I figured I didn't want to have to do this entire process over again. So then I figured, well, if I can do this, why not make it into a web server? And so I started on the screen back here. This is the, well, I guess everything's still a work in progress, but it's at a point where we can use it in the classroom now. So I created a web server that on the back end manages a connection to Spot and kind of controls everything for you. And I have this nice little interface that I created. So it started out, I was like, let me just put a button in to connect to the robot, and then a button to turn the robot on. And it kind of just evolved as I went. And I saw like other people on our Spot team were working on other programs. And I figured, well, I want to add a way so they don't have to connect every time. So then there's a way you can actually send entire folders with files. You just have to give it a file name to run, and it will run all the code that you want to run without having to disconnect and reconnect. And it's especially good for a collaborative environment where you have multiple different people working on programs, rather than having to have each of them disconnect and then reconnect and authenticate and turn the robot on. We can just have one web server that's always on, and then just send our code, upload it, and have it run that way. So what I realized is Spot's really good for a small team, but for multiple people that are working on different things, it was kind of a pain to have to do everything over and over again. And it was just a lot of time in between when each person could run their code, whereas this way it's a lot faster. So I have some basic functions here. There's, of course, a new stop, the most important thing. I have a little battery indicator in the top right. I'm not sure the glare might be preventing you from seeing it, but I have a little battery indicator on the top right. I have a little keyboard control. So I'm gonna put him in walk mode now. I can tell Spot to walk around using the keyboard. And I can have him turn, and then I can have him sit down. I can have him stand back up. And then, of course, I can have him rotate. And he'll actually hold the position wherever he goes. So this interface is really good for especially people that aren't, really big coders. So that rather than having to use the controller that comes with Spot, which is great, but that's obviously, it's a separate device that you have to carry around with you. Everyone's going to have their own computer. So like, for example, when I go off to college in a few days, Lori is still going to be here. They're going to be teaching classes. She'll be able to use this interface to control Spot and control the robot. So of course, I can disconnect the robot. I can disconnect different services like the lease service and the eStop service in case any other devices want to be connected. I have some live video feeds showing up, stitching the images using the shader in one of Boston Dynamics examples. So it makes it really easy, like I said, really easy to use. And then the other thing I did is I was working on this and I thought to myself, what about people that don't really know much about coding, that are just starting to get into coding? I want them to be able to code Spot too. So what I did is I created a Scratch extension that will connect to my web server. And the Scratch extension actually allows people to send commands to Spot who don't really know much about coding. So little kids that are just getting into coding, showing things on the screen, making a character jump up and down is cool. But a lot of times children say, well, what can I use this for? Like, that's great, but look at, Minecraft, look at other video games that have so much. What's the point in me doing this? But to have a physical device, especially something that's such a household name as Boston Dynamics Spot Robot, to be able to control that is really exciting for children. We've been using this all summer, and they've always been really enthusiastic about using Scratch to control the robot because there's really no other way to do that. So I have a video feed directly from Spot in the stage inside of Scratch. And I can, of course, disable and enable it. It loops into Scratch's existing video code and just kind of creates its own video provider that connects to my web server that I made. And I can send commands. So I can tell Spot to sit and I can tell him to stand. He's a little bit too far away or too close to the TV. So I'm going to drag out the move forward block. I'm going to tell him to move forward a little bit. I can have him move forward. So this is really cool. There are a lot of different functions that we can do. We can set the stand height of Spot. So I can tell him to stand up high, or I can tell him to stand down low. And I can tell him to move his body left or right. I can tell him to strafe left or right. I can change the pitch that he stands at. There's like the body rotation. So he's gonna rotate. I can set the coordinates, so I can set the degree of rotation in every axis. So he's gonna turn like that. I can reset his rotation. So this Scratch plugin is really the first of its kind. There's really nothing out there that can do the same thing. Because I think Boston Dynamics really geared Spot and the SDK and controlling it towards big companies and like obviously the military. But it's also a really good teaching tool. There was just no good tool to use to allow children and people new to coding to code Spot. So this, like I said, over the summer has really provided elementary school and middle school children, students to control Spot. And yeah, so back in the control panel, I can toggle whether the server is accepting commands. So if I tell Spot to move forward, I can, it's not going to work because I told the server not to accept the command, which is really useful when kids start to get excited and they're like, I want to walk the robot forward 100 feet. And you're like, well, you can't do that. And you can just stop the commands, just like that. And then I also have a Python module that I wrote, where people that are a little bit more advanced coders can write their own programs, still using very simple commands like stand, walk, rotate, so that they don't need to do all the setup code. They can just write very simple programs, kind of get into learning to code without all of the hassle and boilerplate code to connect and everything. So yeah, I've been spending many hours a week for the past between 8 months and a year, really, developing, debugging, trying to figure out the best way to allow people to use Spot. Again, that don't know a lot about coding. And as I had already said, when I go to college, people are going to be able to use this. So it's really a very good tool. If you want to learn more, you can about Code and Circuit, you can go to our Facebook page, Code and Circuit, or you can find us on the web at codeandcircuit.org, and there will be some more information there. And yeah, so my name's William Shirey. This is the web server and Scratch extension that I've been creating for a while. First of its kind, probably first in the world, to allow students to use Spot and control Spot without knowing a lot about how to code.
Thank you all for listening.